I hope you're well, Doc.
I'm fine, and good morning to all your listeners. I greet you.
Well, first of all, I think you can help me address that better. Is plantain a crop?
Senna, it's a food crop, yes, it is.
Okay.
It just happens to fall under the roots and tubers.
Okay, roots and tubers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Having said that, am I right when I say that, because I have read that document, I don't know whether there was a subsequent review that added plantain, but I never saw plantain in there. I'm correct, right?
In the PhD document?
Yes.
No, it wasn't one of the selected crops for promotion under PFJ. And even in the PFJ 2 that we are about to discuss, it's not part as well. So what happened was that clearly Dr. Akoto was responding to our criticism that he was wasting the country's resources in the so-called flagship program. And because the reality was that the poultry farms were closing down. Indeed, they have been closed down. We just have just a few, like 2-3 of them that are functioning at the moment. And so one of the challenges of the poultry farm sector was that they could not afford cost of feed. And that even where they committed to expending more resources because the birds were dying, they were not getting the means to buy, to be able to formulate their own feed. And then at the same time, food price inflation was going very high. And yet, when Dr. Akoto was reporting to Parliament or speaking to the press, he said maize production had increased. And he argued, he was tiding us that it increased from 1.8 million metric tons in 2016 to 3.4 million metric tons. And yet, we couldn't find the maize. And so, in that direct response to the food price inflation that was recorded, it's still being recorded in the country, and also the unavailability of these commodities for the users, because the users themselves started complaining that they can't find the maize. And even we, the households, started complaining that when we go to the market, we don't find them. And then we were complaining about the price hikes and so on and so forth. So Akoto had to respond to them, and it coincided with the harvest season for plantain. So somehow, because of the way they take Ghanaians, they take us for non-questioning, and then we'll take anything hook, line, and sinker, in fact, with due respect. This is the way they perceive us. So Dr. Akoto had to go cut plantain at a cost from nearby forest zones to the MOFA headquarters in Accra to tell you that there is food. And yet, we didn't see him cut rice. We didn't see him cut maize. We didn't see him cut poultry. We didn't see him cut soya beans, cowpea, no. Tomato, no. Onions, no. Then you ask, how many Ghanaians survive on just plantain? 2, if plantain is even the sole food that you had to cut to Accra, how about Takrady? How about Kumasi? How about Wa? How about the rest of the country? How about nearby districts, Ada? So it was a hoax, it was a demonstration of monumental failure. And today, the president has confirmed that what we have been criticizing, complaining that the country's resources has been expended needlessly on enriching some individuals, so much so that they even had to go on a tip at presidency to show that they have made enough money that they can now contest and prosecute a presidential campaign. That was exactly what Platform for Food and Jobs delivered, and not food security, not driving down food prices for the country. So, for us, these are the scenario, and so that was why plantain was brought to MOFA headquarters to sell. It was just to see whether some Ghanaians will buy it. And surprisingly, some NPP communicators bought into it. They said, the food is abundant. And that we are even demonstrating it by bringing the plantain to Accra to sell. And, that's what we delivered, unfortunately.
Well, having said that, then I'm also. What is your challenge with what has been launched, the phase 2?
Okay, so Sarah, you see the phase 2 launching is a clear demonstration that since 2017, the agricultural sector in this country has made, if you like, no achievement. What they have done is to create a platform for our scarce resources to be expended needlessly. Because one, the Planting for Food and Jobs program was a succession of a MAPO program that President Mahama and his team got from the Canadians. But in a very crafty manner that this government operates, they decided not to go with the label MAPO. So what they did was to just say that we are going to create jobs from agricultural production. And so we will call it Planting for Food and Jobs. And that they will complement it with one district, one factory. And that during the dry season, there are challenges that rural communities face. So they will complement it with one village, one dam. So you see that all these things were very high-sounding and palatable to the ear. This is how the name Planting for Food and Jobs was birthed. And so the concept, the principle, which they didn't change, was that it was going to improve productivity of farm, particularly smallholder farmers. And that one of the reasons for improving the need to improve productivity was that the soils in our countryside, where most small farmers operated, had dwindled, and that there was a need to boost soil fertility so that production can increase. And that seeds that farmers use were generally seeds that were non-improved, that were not producing so much food. And that a lot of science had gone on and produced very improved seeds. Some were drought resistant, some were early maturing, and so on and so forth. And that program should promote them alongside extension services. So there was a huge conscious training of extension officers to go around these farmlands and support the farmers to be able to produce the food. But this was supposed to be implemented along a value chain, because we had experience from Professor Mills that the block farm system, which allowed governments to do input credits to farmers and plow blocks of farms for them, and then we have the farmers harvested, and then the extension system, the agri system will go back and collect some of the produce, as payment for the inputs that was used to support them, and so on and so forth. And so we realized that there was a huge gap in produce, that we didn't even have places to store them. We didn't have an arrangement and logistics of moving them around. So if you recall the days of my uncle, Uncle Kwamina, Uncle Kwesi Ahoy, as Minister for Agriculture, you will notice that the National Food Buffer Stock was established to be able to go and buy this excess produce that came from the system. And National Food Buffer Stock was supposed to stock some of this produce as a security buffer, but at the same time store them across its warehouses in the region, so that if there was shortage being recorded at any part of the country, the buffer stock will release some of those stocks to be able to drive down prices. So, Planting for Food and Jobs 1 was to latch on that experience and make sure that the productivity was improved and that there will be a system to be able to mop up the produce. But they focused on the fertilizers because that's where the money was. You see, that's where the corrupt activities could take place. That's where you needed to deal with businessmen who could import fertilizers and other improved seeds and go into terms with them. So the focus was there and not adding value or turning around the stock in ways that will make sure that prices continue to be down for Ghanaians to be able to afford, for poultry farms to be able to be sustained, and so on and so forth. And it's not me creating that. Their own documents in the Planting for Food and Jobs too outline some of the reasons and limitations of Planting for Food and Jobs 1. And one of the critical reasons they say is that there was a non-adoption of the value chain approach. I mean, any basic, you say, I know you are not a farmer. You are likely to be a fisherman. But look, my brother, any basic person knows that if you produce and you don't add value to it, even our market women know when they produce granules, the best is to turn it into granule paste. The best is to turn it into granule oil. That's when they will get more money. So you need to think of value addition. How much more a country's agricultural setup? So you see that was not handled. And so what we realized was that the food that was produced just dissipated. They didn't have a way of handling the produce that came out of the country. So you had the farmers deciding on rational approaches to dispense of their produce. So anybody that comes with a price that they thought was okay, they will sell it out, including foreigners. So at the end of the day, we spent money to produce food and we didn't have the food in the country. And for 6 years, there was a management of the agri sector in this country. For at least the last 3 years that we have been at the helm of affairs at the Committee for Agriculture in Parliament, we have held this country, this government, to these points and saying that you cannot continue to do this and then expect different results. And so the launch of the Planting for Food and Jobs 2 is just a vindication that the program has failed and that the issues we have been raising all along are true after all. Fena, this is a program that in 2021 expended 439 million Ghana cedis. In 2022, they expended 614 million Ghana cedis. And 2023, 660 million Ghana cedis. So you realize that this is just a platform to loot countries' resources, because what that program has delivered is that it has delivered a 54% food price inflation in this country. What it has delivered is that the maize that has been produced cannot be found. You cannot find it. Poultry farmers cannot find it. The users of these commodities cannot find them. So there's evidence that program and the managers of that program tricked this country's citizens. Now, a new minister comes up, and then he's checked the document, he's been briefed adequately of what the record is, and he sees it as a mess, complete mess. So cleverly, what he decides is that he cannot be associated with this mess. So the launch of Planting for Food and Jobs 2 is a demonstration that the current minister doesn't want to be associated with the mess of his predecessor. But because MPP have touted the program, Planting for Food and Jobs, as the best for this country's agriculture, they cannot be seen to be kowtowing to the minority's criticism and cancelling the project. So what they've decided to do is to rebrand it and call it Planting for Food and Jobs Phase 2. That is what has happened.
But Phase 2 sounds more like you're transitioning from a first phase which you consider successful to the next phase. Like you move from Phase 1, if Phase 1 does not succeed, you don't move to Phase 2. What gives you the impression that they're trying to distance themselves from what has happened first?
You see, on a normal day, what you just said will stand. But Sana, tell me, we in practice, 6-year implementation of any program and then turning it over or transiting it to another phase. It's a very strange time period. We know that even our presidential tenure is 4 years. But we know that we have always formulated programs to be at least 5 years, 10 years, 20-year period, 25-year, 40-year development plan. We've never had a program or a plan spanning 6 years. Name one of them in this country, in whatever development field that you are familiar with. You don't have it. And so I'm saying to you that this is what is the behind story that is behind this Planting for Food and Jobs thing. But again, like I say, they are not able to distance themselves from that vein because they have consistently argued, and you yourself said that background, they consistently argued that the Planting for Food and Jobs have been successful. So if they themselves have been saying it's successful, how did they say that we are now moving to another program? They cannot. So the clever approach is to maintain the name, but call it phase 2 and tell us that they are shifting the focus. But the question that should interest you is, what is the exact shift of focus? And what results will it translate into in the current dispensation? Now, they tell us that they are going to shift away from input subsidy to a input credit. Let me rephrase. They will shift from an input subsidy to an input credit program. Okay. Then you ask yourself, what does that mean? Now, IMF, that we have just gone into, and they will tell you this, do not support the economy to provide any subsidy in any sector of the economy. Now, they have argued that they won't be going to IMF. They have had all the flowery reasons that they won't take us to IMF. And yes, they took us. So they cannot turn around and tell you that taking us to IMF is introducing conditionality that will put our farmers at a disadvantage. So they present it as if moving away from input subsidy to an input credit is some novelty. And I put it to you, it is not a novelty. Input credit program has been what the business and agribusiness sector has been implementing in this country all along. Look, we are 31 million Ghanaians. 44% of us are farmers. That's what the statistics say. That translates into some 11 or so million Ghanaians that are farmers. The Planting for Food and Jobs, one, is telling us that they have been able to be successful with 1.5 million farmers. That's just about 11%. Now, what happens to the rest of the 9 million Ghanaians who are farmers? Are they Planting for Food and Jobs beneficiaries? No. How did they get their inputs to be able to produce? They use an input credit system. So what that means is that, Senna, if you are an agro-business dealer and you bring in fertilizers and improve seeds and chemicals, I, as a farmer, comes to you and buy and go and produce. But just as we are friends, you know me so much that I say, oh, Senna, I'm able to afford just 10 acres of the inputs. Can you support me with input credit so that I produce 50 acres? And then when I harvest, I'll come and pay. Then you say, oh yeah, Jasaw, I'm very familiar with you. I know you are credible. So I'm going to give you that input credit support. Then you, as an agribusiness or a businessman, give me that support. When I have it, then you come and take some of the produce, or you tell me to sell the produce and give you your money. That's how input credit system works. And for the 9 million Ghanaians, that's what we've been using. So if the government launches a new program and tells you that he's moving into an input credit support, then you ask yourself, what is it going to do new? And you say, are you the one going to procure the inputs and give to the people like Professor Mills did? Then you say no. Then you are going to mobilize private financing, and the private businesses are going to be aggregated and be able to do that. Then I say, do you need to tell the Senate agribusiness company to know that they have farmers to sell their produce to? You don't need to. So my brother, there's nothing new in this program. There's no hope. And from January 2023 up to date, farmers in Ghana have been on their own. There's no government program for them. Inputs, the cropping season is over for the northern sector. A new cropping season has just started in the southern sector. There are no input support for any farmer in this country today. So what that means is that the farmers are producing this year's food using inputs at costs that are determined by the market. So when they have it, they have to sell and make sure they cover their costs. The implication is that food prices are going to shoot up. Now, you cannot have this scenario and expect to transform this economy. You cannot have this scenario and expect to transform this economy. Because, again, in the PSG2, we're thinking that they will do an honest appraisal of the Ghanaian situation and realize that we have blocked all forms of income generation, apart from taxation. So what we needed to do is to focus on production and let's produce so much food to be able to process or even export. And so we have thought that classes for food and jobs too will prioritize some commodities. We're thinking that government will be bold to say that we are taking rice, we are taking maize, we are taking tomato, or even if you think that you don't have capacity to do tomato and onion, leave the Niger to specialize their thing. Also specialize in something. Take cassava, specialize in them, and say that even though IMF say we are not going to produce, we are not going to allow for subsidies in the economy, we can negotiate some package for this specific commodity, because that's what this country needs to survive on. And then you promote that and give good conditions of production for farmers in those sectors. Then we know that you are prioritizing and you are targeting efforts and investment in something that will translate into transforming the economy. Now, what do we have? They say they selected 11 priority crops and they are going to develop them. When you say how they're going to do it, then they say they will be able to mobilize private resources to do input credit arrangement for those crops and promote them. Nothing transformational. What that means is that, Senna, the Avaime rice that you want to enjoy is more costly than the rice that comes from Thailand. Why? Because the input costs that Avaime use to produce their rice is at a high cost compared to his Thai counterpart, whose government have subsidized inputs for producing that Thailand rice. So he's able to break even, export to you, and the price is still lower than your own Avaime rice. So what exactly are you doing to tackle the import substitution arrangement? Nothing. So if planting for food and jobs, too, is not going to do anything about this. And our rice importation bill will continue to be over $2 million every year. Where are we going? Okay. Nothing on poultry. What will happen to poultry? Nothing.
Ghana's gold.
So Senna, this is the scenario. It is on this basis that we argue that the PSG2 as launched is just a face-saving measure. It's not going to translate into any transformation of the agricultural sector. The food security requirements of this country are real. Food price inflation is high. I'm sure you reviewed the World Bank report about 3-4 weeks ago that told us that 850,000 more Ghanaians have been plunged into abject poverty because of food price. Now, if this is the scenario, and that pathway is going to continue, then we have to be careful. We have an emergency, a crisis situation.
Okay, Doc.
And what our government is promising us doesn't look like the way out.
Doc, please hold the line for me for a moment, because we're joined, luckily, by General Secretary, General Agricultural Workers. And in fact, he's been listening into you whilst we're talking. Mr. Edward Kareweh, thank you very much for your time, and good morning to you.
Good morning to you all, and then to Honorable too. for his contribution. Good morning.
The first point he makes is about the planting for food phase 1, planting for food and jobs phase 1. In fact, usually when you hear phase 2, it means that the government is satisfied with the first phase and they've decided to roll out a second phase. And it also suggests that there has been a second phase planned long ago. It was always in the offing that once the first phase succeeds, you go on with the second phase. Did the phase 1 or whatever was done over the last 6 years, has it succeeded for you for a phase 2 to be put in?
Well, thank you again for this opportunity to contribute on your esteemed platform. Well, the phase 1, there are two sides to it. From government perspective, it has been a success. From the recipients of the outcome of the phase 1, it has not been successful. And the recipients are those who go to the market to buy food, to eat. The recipients are those who use the produce to process it and turn into secondary products. The recipient is the ordinary person on the street who acquiring basic food is a problem. So if you look at it from the point of government, which they have consistently been stating that the plan for food and jobs has been a success, and giving out figures also showing that it has helped in guaranteeing food security and so on. So from government's point of view, the phase 1 is successful. But from the ordinary point of man's point of view, please, the plan for food and jobs is not successful.
Having said that, with that conclusion in mind, are you surprised that they've decided to go ahead with the phase 2?
Well, I am struggling to see the link between the phase 2 and the phase 1. So
Ghana's gold.
The link is not clear, it's not strong, and that itself speaks a lot that either they have in their mind knowing very well that the phase 1 has not been successful, decided to abandon it and have a new thing altogether. That I see it in the phase 2. So the linkage for me, I'm not seeing it because, and I believe sincerely, it's a vindication of the fact that the phase 1 has not been successful. So you cannot continue in that trajectory.
So for you, what they call a phase 2 is actually sort of a reviewed policy, sort of.
Well, we have also been at the forefront of calling for a comprehensive review, audit, and accountability on the phase 1. Because the phase 1 cost this country so much money, resources, but did not deliver on its objectives. And we must always, limit ourselves to what was the objective of the phase 1. Because we can't just be talking in generality and everybody saying whatever he or she wants. But if we refer to the objectives, then we'll see whether or not we have achieved those objectives. If after looking at the objectives and there are unintended, benefits that came with it, then we can also add it. So the phase 1 had two main objectives. One, to produce enough food to feed this country, and the other one is to create jobs. So we ask ourselves, in which particular year or overall, for the period that the Plan for Food and Jobs was in operation, that we have been able to produce enough food for this country, or we have been able to create jobs, and how sustainable are those jobs? So we just need to focus on that, and so that no one will not be talking without reference. So for us, and it is good for everybody. Look, it is during the period of the phase 1 that the poultry industry collapsed.
Ghana's gold.
And the poultry industry depends largely on soya bean and then maize. So if our main focus in the phase 1 is targeting maize production, is targeting soya production, why is it that the poultry industry could not even get maize to feed the industry? If indeed, even before the Planting for Food and Jobs, the poultry industry had challenges, the aim was that after the phase 1 or during the phase 1, those problems should either go away or be mitigated. But for the period to see the poultry industry collapsing, over 70% of poultry farms have closed down. And it is not for any reason, but it's for the fact that they cannot get the feed which comes from maize and soya. So certainly you can see that the phase 1 cannot be said to be successful. 2, the phase 1 was also bedeviled with man-made challenges. For instance, the fertilizer that was also imported into this country and destined to the farmers never got to the farmers. Much of it did not get to the farmers. It's not just because we are saying it, but it even came from government-owned MAF that the fertilizer was being smuggled out. And that fertilizer smuggling had taken a novelty state to the extent that animals were involved in the smuggling. And one of the animals that got involved in the smuggling was the donkeys that smuggled the fertilizer unaided by human beings. It came from government-owned officials. So it tells you how it became lucrative to smuggle the fertilizer. Can you see that is a success? So can we see that the fertilizer that was supposed to get to the farmers and it doesn't get to the farmers at the right time, can you say that is a success story? You know, can we see that the fertilizer, some of it was of poor quality and given to the farmers and produce little or no effect on their crops? Can we say that is successful? The seed, the certified seed that was promoted, you ask the farmers. Some farmers were supplied with grain instead of seed. And the difference between grain and seed is that when you put the grain in the soil, the germination rate is very low. These are some of the things, and these are core areas of the Plan for Food and Jobs. The Plan for Food and Jobs also targeted tomato production. What has happened? Up to 80% of our domestic consumption of tomato is imported from Burkina Faso for all these years. So, what is the success of it? Look, but government comes up saying that it has been successful because we have got plantain. Is plantain part of the target crops that the Plan for Food and Jobs supported? How much support did they give to plantain production? But we also saw it that we bring plantain and sell to people in Accra. Where have you gotten to? Is that what the phase 1 intended? And is this outcome a positive one? Today, we are here, we all know that inflation, every best person knows inflation is a bad thing for the economy. It's bad for our individual economy. It's bad for the national economy. Food inflation running over about 3 years has been the major contributor to national inflation. Almost up to 50%, around 50% and so on. If the phase one has been successful, will we have things of this nature? To the extent that even around this time, the recent government statisticians report, where even food prices are going up when we are harvesting. Can you call that a success? To the extent that the man could not even understand the logic in it, because we all know that agricultural produce is bulky and perishable. You can't store it easily like that. So you have to take it into the market. So the market is flooded, prices come down. During the harvesting period, even prices are going up. What is a paradox? This is a paradox. And it is not something that it's rocket science. It's just simply because the food is not there. So again, you can just see that the phase one has been a total failure. Yet, we have been, government has been touting it as success, and then also to the extent that it has guaranteed food security. Where is the guarantee of food security when you cannot buy it? So, when industry needs the produce, they cannot get it. So, government can go ahead and continue to say that the phase one is successful, but it doesn't put food on the table of the ordinary Ghanaian. And policies are not for them, but they are to satisfy the people. They should let the people talk for them. You see, yes, it is the people, because it is verifiable. Go to the market. When you are in doubt, go to the market. Go. Just all of us go. You will see what it is. So why should I sit and then I'm not able to buy the food? And someone just sees, put figures there. We have produced so much. There's abundance of food. And I should be clapping. And I should be joyous. How can I, on an empty stomach? Where are the jobs? We should also ask the question. Because I'm a labor man. I have a job. And we have always been fighting for jobs. And that is also the responsibility of government. And the government actually, came to power campaign on the back of creating jobs. So first, we want to see the jobs. Secondly, we want to see how decent those jobs are. Because we are solving problems in context. What is our context? When the ordinary person says, I want a job, what is his understanding of a job? So where are the jobs that have been created with the planting for food and jobs? And how sustainable are they? Even government officials came out to see that the jobs that they claim were created by the Plan for Food and Jobs were not even paying social security, and they were not paying income tax, because they are not the type of jobs that we are all looking for. It is coming from government, and they should show us those jobs that are paying social security. And if you claim to create jobs for the young men and women who are mainly JSS leavers, SHS leavers, and some of them who have not gone to school, and then you create jobs, and they cannot pay social security for now, as they are still very young. At what age would they get jobs to pay social security so that it will be enough for them in future to depend on when they go on retirement? So you can see that those jobs, they don't talk about them again. Look, I think that we have messed up with the agriculture sector. And for some of us, we will not, applaud policy intentions. Because policy intentions are different from policy outcomes. The linkages they try to create. Look, how do you intend to grow agriculture? When you have come with a policy, one village, one dam. You go the time that the dams are supposed to hold water, they don't have water. How do you still call them a dam? And that those dams are for the purpose of agriculture. What is the use of radio as we are talking like this? When it is not clear, I can't listen to you, I can't hear you. What is the use of a TV set you have, however beautiful, big it is, and the pictures are not clear? What is the use of a fridge, however big and beautiful it is, when it does not freeze your items? So what is the use of a dam? When the time you need water, that dam doesn't have water. This is what they have left behind. They should show us. Meanwhile, money has been spent. Now, look, I'm speaking passionately because we have been fighting and advocating for Ghana to transform our increase irrigation agriculture proportion in this country. Eventually, the Polgo multipurpose dam, as the dam started. What is the state of it? Is government really serious about agriculture? If they are serious about agriculture, if the plan for food and jobs is to be successful, then that particular dam, by now we should have been nearing its completion. What has happened with it? So it is there for us to see. It is not what they say. It is what is on the ground. So for them, it is successful. For us, it is not successful.
But so billions of cedis spent. You say first we do not have the food, even the poultry industry is gone. Secondly, we do not have the jobs. Now they are rolling out phase 2. Do you see? To what extent do you see them trying to correct the failures of phase 1 in phase 2, and perhaps rolling out something in phase 2 that will work effectively for the farmers?
Look, the phase 2 is totally or mainly private sector driven. And government has decided to retreat from participating in agricultural production in this country. We all know the important role that the private sector plays. But you see, the private sector is there to make profit. Now, let us move away from the English words that have been used around it, that the phase 2. The question we need to ask is, at the end of the day, are they saying that the farmers will now be able to get the inputs at a lower cost than the market price? The arrangement that has been put in place, input credit system, this and that, aggregator system, this and that, and all that. At the end of the day, would the farmer now be able to access inputs at a lower price than the market price? Because the private people must make money. They must recover costs. They must recover the operational cost. They must make profit. Now, if we put all these things together, they should be able to tell us that in the phase 2, farmers will be able to get inputs at lower cost than the market price. If it is to just get it at the market price, then the phase 2 is not necessary. A government policy is not necessary. You see, and I'm so much particular about this because, look, subsidy is a development strategy, it's a development tool that no country in the world, even as of now, does not apply. You take the US, you take the European countries, they spend billions of dollars and euros in supporting agriculture. Why? Even in spite of their, enduring infrastructural system, the capacity of their farmers to produce, all the institutions are working. In spite of that, they spend billions to support agriculture. So, when today we think that we can make an arrangement and that subsidy is no more important, we'll leave it to the private sector, this and that, and it will result in this. There's no guarantee in that. And we cannot gamble in that because there is cost. There is cost to whatever we are doing. The cost that has been incurred and the results in the phase 1, and the results have been disastrous. Who has been held accountable for that?
And I think let me put that question to Dr. Seidu Jasaw. Doc,
Yes.
sorry for holding you on for some time, and I guess you've been listening to.
It's fine. I've been listening to
Mr. Kareweh. The key question is: you are convinced that phase 1 has failed. You in Parliament have voted billions of cedis for phase 1 of planting for food and jobs. If you are convinced that it has failed, who holds who accountable for the failure?
So part of the accountability effort is what we are just doing. But from a structured institutional level, what we have discussed as a committee on agriculture is to invite the Minister for Agriculture and his team to come to us specifically to account for Planting for Food and Jobs program. The bigger agricultural budget programs, they are systems that we use to appropriate their budget, to do budget oversight, and follow up with performance review, and so on and so forth. So that is a standalone. Now, for these flagship programs, and that's just like what we are calling for on the 3 SHS, is the same thing. This is a program that they themselves are reporting to us have successfully completed a tenure. And so it will be appropriate that you come and account for that successful story. And so we'll be activating the parliamentary system to get the minister and his team to come and account to us. There we shall ask these questions and get official responses that we can then communicate to the Ghanaians.
But do you see any successes at all? Because I'm looking at the 5 models that they were going to work with when they initially started. The food crops, you say they have, that one you have concluded they have failed. But have they at least made any progress in planting for export and rural development, greenhouse technology villages, rearing for food and jobs, agriculture mechanization services? Have there been any successes in those areas?
Okay, so again, and I'm sure the industry player will speak more effectively to that. Again, from what we are aware of, the mechanization is largely based on government bringing in machinery, including tractors, to be able to give to farmers at subsidized prices. Before my party left office, we had an arrangement where government paid 60% of the cost of machinery, and then the farmer was to pay 40% of the cost, spread over a period. Now, unfortunately, in 2017, the new Minister for Agri then changed the policy, and that the farmer was now to pay 60%, and then government paid 40%. So the question is, did they bring in any new tractors? Now, they inherited a program that we had with the Brazilians, and the tractors and machinery were being brought in at different trenches. The first trench came, the second trench came when NDC had left office. So the Minister for Agri then was the one who was in charge of dispensing them. Just before he left again, the third and final trench had come. And so, yes, some machinery that we had contracted with the Brazilians to be able to support Professor Mills' program, which was called Modernization of Agriculture, had these AMSEC, Agricultural Mechanization Centers, and part of that facility was to make sure that we are equipped with machinery to reduce the treasury. So yes, some machinery did come in, and I'm sure they have been dispersed to farmers. Now, in terms of the other objectives, I can't say much because as for the jobs, you like my colleague explained, it's so weird that even when people go to when truckloads of fertilizer gets to the field, and then the casual laborers that we employ to offload these fertilizers were all counted under PFG1 as jobs. And so So this is the kind of jobs they were talking about. So that to that extent, you are the better judge. And so you really don't know whether the other sectors that they outline, you can really point to anything specific as an indicator of the success story. And so it's a mixed bag in my view. What we have ended up knowing, perhaps, is that it's just exposed the insincerity with which the promises that they made have been implemented. Because sincerely, the agri sector has rather reversed in the last 6 years. All the gains that we have made have been reversed. In fact, go to MOFA offices and you appreciate what we are saying. Even disbursement to get officers to run is an eyesore. Take the average district and just go. And you are a journalist. Just go out to the field and check how his officers run at MOFA in the regions, in the districts. And it's a sad story. And these are the units that will anchor implementation of production of food in this country. So you can't point to anything really and say that under PFJ1 that was successful. What you could rather maybe say is that there'll be a lot of noise about fertilizers, planting for food, free fertilizers, free chemicals, and so on and so forth. And yet, what has been the impact? Like my colleagues say, it's a mixed bag. You can't really point to anything and say this is the impact.
In order for this to succeed, the question that Mr. Kareweh is asking is, and I guess this may be a question you may need to put to the minister when it appears before you, would inputs that they are providing for them be cheaper than the market price? He says that's a key question to ask. Is that what you see when you go through at least the documents? Because you've done some analysis.
Senna, to be honest with you, since last night, I've been reflecting on this subject, and I'm beginning to wonder who put that document together. Frankly, I've been wondering who put that document together and what is the objective. Because if you are sincere, and then you have to answer the questions or problems or challenges of agriculture, is that the approach? First of all, how are you going to raise the funding? Because you as a business rely on the market system, the banking, the financial system, just like any other business. There's no special loan for agriculture on special terms. At least government hasn't created that. If you had some funds that is specially dedicated to promoting agriculture, and this fund is given to financial institutions, and there is given to them a condition that they can formulate into products and give to agricultural-related businesses, then you can say that they can access such instruments, such finances, at flexible terms, and they in turn can give that to farmers at very affordable, good negotiated prices and terms. That I can go with. But if you are going to rely on the market system, well, you've not created any fund. And as far as the 2023 budget and the supplementary budget that was presented to us is concerned, we haven't seen any allocation or creation of any fund. So it means that we have to rely on banks and the assistance of loans and the conditions and terms that they use. These are commercial terms. And mind you, interest rates have been increasing. So these businesses will have to go and collect their loans, contract their loans at those terms. So how will the farmer benefit from a good credit arrangement? So the question is, to those who put that document, have you answered the question how? Those lofty English, like my colleague referred to, that you put there, have you asked the question, how are you going to do it? And I put it to you that I don't think that question has been addressed. So even this credit thing they are talking about, they're talking as if we are in space. We're in Ghana. How are you going to get the banks to do that? ADB is our bank. ADB's indebtedness, it can't even carry its load. Are you giving some funds to them? Are you giving special letters of credit? And the letters of credit How will the banks evaluate it to be able to advance the money? Today, as we speak, fertilizer imported, that imported planting for food and jobs fertilizer in 2020, 2021 are still owned by government. And these are people who took loans that were pegged at dollar exchange rate. So with the skyrocketing exchange rate, the loans are killing them. Most of their business have collapsed. So I don't understand. I really need to be educated on how they are going to make credit flexible, lower, and affordable to farmers. At the same time, you are saying that it will be private sector driven. What are the exact measures and incentives you are putting in place to the private sector to be able to drive the agenda you are discussing? That is not provided.
And I'm guessing you'll get us those questions when the minister appears before you.
Exactly so.
Doc, thank you. Let me conclude with Mr. Edward Kareweh, by a big thank you to Dr. Godfred Seidu Jasaw. Mr. Kareweh, on the matter of accountability, what do you have in mind when you say holding them accountable for what has been spent on phase one?
Well, we all know that monies have been spent, and then we need to look at the amount of money we have spent, how it was spent, and then also that's for that part. The other level is also to juxtapose the cost as against the benefits. You see, as against what we have actually produced. You know, as the example I gave, how do you spend millions of money importing fertilizer and supporting maize production, and at the close of the day, there's no maize in the system and the poultry industry collapses? You can clearly see that it was not worthwhile spending that money when the maize industry collapsed, or sorry, the poultry industry collapsed. We are talking about the tree crop model. What is it that we have today? Go and find out from all the different types of trees that are under it, and ask them whether the program has been able to support them to get land to grow their trees, or even help protect the existing trees. I am just from those companies and plantations, and I'll tell you that you get there, Galamsey also pitch camp under the trees, and all of us know that they go and destroy all that. So what is the use of the tree crop model? You ask of the livestock. They should tell us the success of it. Largely, our livestock comes from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. That one, it is clear. So, when we talk about the accountability, is to match it against that, so that when we identify the weaknesses, we'll make sure that future policies like the phase 2 will not fall into same situation. But you see, the biggest worry, sadness, is that when you tout something as successful, to the extent that you say it is 100% successful, then you have foreclosed any opportunity to review it, because it is successful. It's 100% successful. You see, it doesn't have problem, so you will not even go and look for it. So the first thing is about our mentality and the attitude of our policymakers. When you are not outside, you think that your ideas are not supreme. Immediately you assume officialdom. You then become what? Knowing all. And whatever you see is the best, and you are more patriotic to this country than anybody who is not in government. I mean, look, that cannot be the case. So that mindset must change as a beginning. And it is our policymakers who are behaving this. It's also because they are not accountable for any losses they create, because the money is not theirs. So the accountability, maybe there's various structures are there, parliament is there, it can be one of the institutions to account for. And even government itself is supposed to hold public officials accountable. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that that responsibility of government to hold public officials accountable is being exercised. You see, so we are just ordinary Ghanaians. We can only call for them to be accountable, but the one who is to hold them accountable is also there. If they are not doing it, it is very difficult for us. We can only talk, and we have been doing that. And we think that if we are in a democracy, which means that you must listen to your people, it means government must listen to us. And we are not saying anything wrong. If the food is there and prices have come down, we don't want, if I even talk or anybody talks, says that it is not good, people will say it is good. Government official, statistician, what a renowned professor of economics, he has said that over 50% of national inflation is caused by food inflation. So is it not common sense? And indeed, if we are really interested in solving the problems of this country, it's for us to focus on agriculture and make sure that we bring down food prices. It is not to come and condemn and attack anybody who does not share the view that, in fact, in a democracy, we must have alternative views. But of course, because we are not in government, we don't know any longer. And when people were not in government, they knew. Their views, they had good views. Now that they have gone into government and you are not in government, you don't have any good views. That mentality must change, and we must. That is one of the accountabilities we have to get.
Mr. Kareweh, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure talking to him when it comes to the agri sector. He's General Secretary, General Agricultural Workers Union, speaking to us about the launch of Phase 2 of Planting for Food and Jobs. And of course, a big thank you to Dr. Godfred Seidu Jasaw, who is Deputy Ranking Member, Food and Agriculture, Food, Agri and Cocoa Affairs Committee of Parliament. There's a lot of questions when it comes to the matter of food, agri, and even cocoa. Cocoa is also a huge area of concern nowadays. Now, let me read to you what was contained in the documents. The goal of Planting for Food and Jobs is this: